Okay, so this is not the topic I imagined starting the year with, but a lot has happened both locally and in the world in general. So why not jump straight in here and talk about autism and politics? And I know some of you may not share my take on some of this stuff, so it's not my intention to either convince you of my opinions or even to claim my opinions are the only way. But healthy political discussion involves listening to those around us who may have differing views to ours, and then working out whether our own views need to be modified or reformed in the light of those discussions. Listening, learning, growing and changing is healthy. Denying others the chance to speak is not. So what has politics to do with autism? And why am I going on about it at the start of 2026? Hi, I'm Phil, a very late diagnosed autistic older adult, and it's my aim to help other autistic adults discover their individual autistic awesomeness. Well, firstly, one of the key traits of many autistic people is that we are typically very aware of issues of fairness, justice, inclusion and equity. These fantastic traits are born out of the way the autistic brain processes information, and in many cases will be more acute compared to non-autistic people. This can lead to the autistic person being more likely to seek to take action or speak out against perceived injustices than many other people. When I think about my own journey as a child and teenager, the times I got myself into the most trouble was when I felt compelled to defend other kids who were being bullied, which actually then put me in the sights of those bullies. On more than one occasion, I received a punch to the head at school because of that. When we look at all this from a more adult perspective, this tends to look more like the autistic person being passionate about certain issues, leading to some becoming vocal opponents of injustice or advocates for minority or mistreated groups. It therefore follows that autistic people can be both keen watchers of political events as well as activists in seeking justice. So where does this come from in the autistic brain? As we have talked about in some of the previous podcasts, autistic people have a heightened sense of empathy, meaning we can feel other people's pain and distress deeply. This can lead to the autistic person hyperfocusing on the topics causing this distress and look for solutions. Autistic people are often said to exhibit rigid or black and white thinking styles, which can make us more likely to think in terms of absolutes. One outcome of this can lead to a heightened sense of morality, as right and wrong come to the fore. Added to this is the fact that autistic people are often highly logical thinkers, meaning that the autistic person might process the complexities of issues and come to opinions on many of these topics from this lens of fairness and morality. So here again, autism is political. But this political nature or tendency may be a surprise to non-autistic people and may confuse them and even cause us to be dismissed entirely. Many people are still ignorant of what autism really is and may be stuck believing the outdated stereotypes. This may mean that people think we may not be intelligent enough to form strong or valid opinions. We only need to think back to the words of RFK Jr., who said of autistic children, "These are kids who will never pay taxes, never hold a job, they'll never play baseball, they'll never write a poem, they'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted." This type of stereotyping dismissal of the capabilities or potential of autistic people by a prominent person leads the wider population to also dismiss us. And this may also mean dismissing our ability to form very rational, logical, compassionate opinions about complex topics, which is absurd because this is often the type of thing we are really good at. So why am I focusing on this topic now? As mentioned at the top, since my last podcast in December, there have been several incidents in the news cycle that have prompted an internal response in me. And the responses have been to the political side of these events and how my autistic nature processes that and prompts that response within me. So let's have a brief look at these events and issues and my autistic politic. Firstly, in Australia, just before Christmas, we had a terrorist attack on the Jewish community at Sydney's Bondi Beach. This was a horrendous act of violence driven by ideology, religious and racist notions. Now that in itself was horrific and needs no further commentary. What stood out to me though was the response in the aftermath, including political attacks against the Australian government by political opponents and even the Israeli government. Without going into too much detail, these political attacks were aimed at the fact that Australia has voiced support for a Palestinian state, which in the mind of these opponents has led to anti-Semitism in this country. Now, this is a tenuous link, but one that has been seized upon. My response here from my autistic perspective has been twofold. Firstly, abhorrence at the terrorist attack and support for the targeted Jewish community, but subsequently revulsion that this atrocity has been callously used as a political weapon. The next issue that emerged over this period was the US government's grab for Venezuelan oil by abducting the Venezuelan president and First Lady. Now let's be clear, Maduro was not a moral leader, but calling the takeover of Venezuela a law enforcement operation is pure fiction by the US president. Even the killing of people on the drug boats, while they were probably conducting criminal activities in transporting drugs, by killing them all without any criminal proceedings amounts to extrajudicial killings, which is illegal under international law, and was clearly a ploy or excuse for the military action to take Venezuela for the purpose of seizing its natural resources. From my autistic perspective, clearly a horrible act of greed and falsehood by the Trump administration. Then we come to the third incident, which was the shooting in Minneapolis of Renee Nicole Good. The shooting by federal officers of a young woman who was acting morally and ethically by advocating for immigrants being mistreated by government officials is also a horrendous crime committed by agents of the US government. Again, as an autistic person, I want to speak against these actions and the people who cause these horrendous crimes sanctioned by a corrupt and malevolent administration. My autistic sense of justice and fairness is triggered by this in particular, and so by speaking out about this, I am making what is a response to political actions. Again, autism is political. Now at this point, I want to add a side point. I am in no way anti-American. In fact, the American people I have interacted with through my travel and work, not to mention the American friends I've made through the autism community, are the most warm and generous people. So no, it's not about America which drives this response in me. It is purely about the despicable leadership and governance by the Trump administration, who is by his very actions making America the weakest it's been since July the 4th, 1776. And that is sad. So yes, Trump, making America weak again. Okay, so the fourth thing that has happened, which fires up my internal political autistic, has been over the last few days, and this one is a bit more personal. In my home state of Victoria, we have had extreme weather, leading to catastrophic bush and grass fires, and these have led to the loss of many properties, wildlife, rural animals and businesses. Where I get fired up here is about the political response to man-made climate change and the outcome of this, which is environmental destruction through a warming climate, and extreme weather, which in this case caused the fires. Now, fires are a part of living in this part of the world and always have been. But the changing climate is making them more dangerous and destructive than ever. The problem here is that the action to curb the worst effects of climate change takes political will and courage to change the way we as a species consume energy and resources. In my country, that has meant an opposition by some politicians to reducing reliance on fossil fuels, saying the transition will cost too much as we have such an abundance of gas, oil and coal still in the ground yet to be exploited. This addiction to fossil fuels is not good enough, as we also have hugely abundant renewable resources and potential. And when I hear the likes of Trump say, "Drill, baby, drill," my autistic political brain flares with a burning rage. And as a postscript to this point, I mentioned that this issue has become personal. Just a few days ago, in these fires, close relatives lost their house to a firestorm that decimated their small town. Okay, so as I edit this, there are a couple of extra clarifications I think I should add in at this point. Firstly, a few of my examples here relate to America. So as an Australian, how is that any of my business, you might ask? Well, valid question, and one that I can also relate back to how my autistic brain thinks. While these issues may not appear to affect me personally, my autistic sense of fairness and empathy does not just focus on what is good for me, so I am driven to respond to issues beyond my immediate sphere. Added to this, of course, is the fact that America is the most influential society and culture on the planet, so what happens there does actually affect us all. So yes, it is my right to speak out on these things. Also, you might look at the issues I highlight both here and in other podcasts and dismiss me as just a radical lefty, but this is not the case. In fact, as a younger person, I was very conservative in my viewpoints. And again here, I will explain this from the angle of how my autistic brain processes politics. Because I am more focused on the issues from my autistic sense of right and wrong and how those outcomes impact all people, that's my autistic empathy, I have no space left to care about whether those issues are left, right, liberal, conservative, this party or that party. That stuff is just irrelevant to me. And this way of thinking is actually liberating. Okay, back to the video. Okay, so there we have a few reasons why my mind is dwelling on this topic at the moment. So does all this mean that autistic people should become activists? Well, no, that is not what I'm saying here. For some, that may well be the case. And we have seen some amazing autistic advocates whose dedication has brought awareness to issues, such as Temple Grandin and her advocacy for animal rights, and more recently Greta Thunberg's advocacy for climate issues. The response of each and every autistic person to politics and advocacy is a personal decision and will depend on many factors beyond your passion for any individual topic. Some will have the personal capacity to turn that passion into physical action, but for others, that might be a step too far. I would say do what is right for you in the context of acting on political ideals. Maybe writing letters or starting a podcast might be starting actions to explore political activity. But I would also urge you to be careful in any political activism. As we saw in Minnesota, actions of others can quickly impinge on our personal safety and well-being. I am not saying don't go out on the streets to protest. Only be aware of the dangers of doing so and have a plan how and when to remove yourself if the situation escalates. And in some parts of the world, any form of political activism may be dangerous. So be aware of your environment and stay safe. Okay, so that's it for now. Again, as I say, not a topic I expected to be starting the year with, but hopefully it's been a thought starter. Feel free to share in the comments if you have been motivated to protest in some small way against political agendas and whether you think that being autistic has influenced that. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.